Welcome, everyone, to another great GSV Student Summit hosted by Convergence Tech. I am your moderator, Holly Wiki. Our topic today is financial wellness, and this was actually requested for by our students since it's not a topic that is widely taught. So we're proud to introduce you to our guest speakers, Brice from Globalive and Paula from CIBC, who will walk you through some of today's hottest topics pertaining to financial wellness. We're also excited to introduce you to a few students who will share with us their tips for being a financially independent student. With that, I'll let Brice start us off.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Brice Scheschuk, as Holly said. I'm an entrepreneur in Canada, and over the last number of years, I've been expanding my impact-related activities, and a topic that is very near and dear to my heart for a whole bunch of reasons is around financial literacy. I'll be introducing the topic with some macro themes, and my colleague for this webinar, Paula from CIBC, will take over and dive into them in a little bit more detail. So the first slide I put up on every presentation I do on every topic, no matter financial literacy or other, is I always like to remind people that what we're doing here today, Paula and myself, I want you to digest and I want you to think about it as you are all advancing through your careers, as you're building your judgment and your experience. It is very important to continue the cycle and to give it back to the next generation. You'll find that very quickly you'll be advancing in your endeavors. And the act of giving, I call it the dirty little secret of mentorship. The act of giving back actually allows you to learn more than you give. So I encourage you to consider that as you go through your lives. My background quickly is really business building. I'm a chartered accountant in Canada. And after doing my accountancy, I very quickly got the entrepreneurial bug. And in the mid to late 90s, started my first business with my business partners, did a sequence of business building predominantly in telecom, sold those businesses about 5 years ago, and have built an investment platform with my partners focused on kind of all different types of investing. Now, what I say about this slide when I talk to it is the reality is this is the 10-day of success slide, and pretty much the rest of it was a sequence of errors, mistakes, failures, and so on that one learns from, one builds from, it makes them stronger, and so on. So my hope here is, I'm 50, I've been doing this for a long time, and I hope to kind of send you guys in a few different directions to learn and to build on at a nice early stage in your lives and careers to really help you with building some of your financial wellness. Okay, topics we'll cover is just a very high level of what is financial literacy and some of the behavioral aspects therein. We're then going to talk about the base pillar of calculating your, we'll call it your net savings, positive or negative. So what you earn, what you spend, what your net is, positive or negative, which basically means savings or debt. Then we'll talk a little bit about some theories around investing and some concepts. We'll move to a definition of rich, which I think is very important to kind of conclude with, and then we'll talk about some next steps. Okay, financial literacy is, as you can see from this definition, is the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources for a lifetime of well-being. This was a definition done, I think, in Barack Obama's presidency. They were very concerned about the US nation's financial literacy. I have that concern globally. And what I would say to you is that the macro themes that I like to talk about are, we do not teach financial literacy well in any school systems globally. It's strange to me as I look back on it that we don't consider this a core competency that benefits all of us to live lives that are more comfortable, and that we are building wealth and we're building retirement and we're understanding the concepts of inheritance, next generation wills, and all of these kinds of concepts. They're so fundamental to kind of a comfort of a society, and yet it's not taught well. So this is an attempt to bring these concepts to you to kind of build from. Financial literacy and wellness is lifelong. Okay, you are always going to be learning. Things are always evolving and changing. There are fundamental principles, but it will continue to evolve. And it is something that you want to be learning and staying close to over the course of your lives. I am a big believer in taking an ownership mindset for one's own financial situation, not blaming others if something goes wrong, being systematic and disciplined, and having that accountability. You all being here today is part of taking ownership. You will make mistakes. I can tell you that over the course of my career, the market's dropped 50% 3 times, and I've had to stare at my net worth kind of getting crushed down. The goals and the behaviors that one does in those difficult times, building back from it and being resilient, are how you win long term. It's super important that you guys are coming into these concepts at the young age that you're at. You will hear about compounding. Okay, time is your friend at the ages that you are, and it becomes your enemy as you get older and you're behind and not building and so on. So I'm super happy that you are coming in early to talk about these concepts. It is the right time to be thinking about it. A couple of other points. With this global web that we all interact with social networks, with all the different mechanisms, all the creator economy and so on, there's never been more ability to learn, to utilize financial content that's available globally for your own circumstances as well as fundamental. Take advantage of that. The other thing I'll say is that the technology and the fact that we all have this computer in our hand all the time has actually done something very interesting, both from a work standpoint and how we can work remote and do things remote, but also how we access and interface with the world. Okay, couple of final slides on the intro. So I talked about accountability. I want to reemphasize this point. I'm a huge believer in taking ownership. The earlier you do that, the more that you think through what they call the owner's mindset and have accountability for the actions around financial literacy and wellness, the more you will win. This is a famous quote from a gentleman named Mike Tyson, who was a famous boxer, a global heavyweight champion. He said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And he was referring to getting ready for a boxing match, walking in, taking that first punch in your face, and then everything kind of changes and you're now in the arena. I like to think about this when I talk about themes like financial, okay? You are working on a calculated plan. You know, you're building you're following the rules, you're earning, you're saving, you're investing and so on. And then something happens and there's a huge drop in the market. And you look at that, you know, you look at your accounts, you look at your statements, and you see this thing happen that changes radically. We've seen it a number of times through the business cycles. Your goal, it's at those moments where you get punched in the face, where how you react becomes super important and is how you win long term. Okay. A corollary to that is the concept of resiliency or anti-fragility, which means bouncing back from stressors and crises and getting stronger. In the Biblio, I have a few jumping off points to talk about this. There's a famous Greco-Roman school of philosophy called Stoicism that I love this quote, and I would again encourage you to consider this in your mindset. You don't control what happens, you control how you respond. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about crises. And then finally, good old Winston Churchill, UK wartime leader. We don't do well in our society with failure, okay? And what I say to people is failure is how you learn. If you go solely from success to success, it's actually a struggle to learn. So if you have a problem, if you make a mistake, if there's a failure as you're going through this journey, that's okay. That's not your fault. You learn from it, you get better, you get stronger. Okay, let's talk about the first pillar. Income minus spending equals positive or negative savings. As a Canadian, I have to put up a hockey quote. This is their most famous hockey player of all time. His name's Wayne Gretzky. And he said, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it has been. And I use this quote when I advise younger people about how to think about their earning potential. Okay. And this is the income side. It's not, you know, it's a thoughtful exercise to kind of follow a number of principles to build your base of active income. Okay. A friend of mine once said to me, think of it as a triangle: passion, competency, and where you can earn a fair income. Okay. He said to me, my passion is soccer, or football for those outside of North America, but my talent is not there. So I have to find things that I both am passionate about, that I like, and that I'm good at, and that have earning potential. That's what I like to say is the triangle for income. I would also add, globally, we're in what I would call a golden age of learning, credentialing, creating, and entrepreneurship. I mean, we've heard terms like the creator economy, of the ability to take more control of one's employment situation, the ability to credential using online resources that technology companies and others are making available, often for free. Another point I make on income is to maximize optionality. And I want to tell a story here. I've been mentoring a young kid who went through university, and when he started in school, he had the intention to take his undergrad and then go to law school. He took his undergrad in political science, which is a fine discipline. And when he got to his third year, he decided that he did not want to go to law school. And he called me, and he finished his degree, and he was really struggling in the job market. And so what I said to him is, I said, look, it's hard sometimes with an undergrad of that nature to get a job in the business community. I said, why don't you go to one of these tech boot camp schools, get a credential that's compact, very focused on kind of what's current on trend, and then see what the job market does. He actually took that advice to heart, and he ended up spending 3 months doing a boot camp. And I just heard actually in the last couple of days that he got a job at one of the big 4 firms, Deloitte, in a certain practice doing consulting. And what I say to people is, take that example. When you start school, your life, your mind is going to change 50 different times. So think about, if your intention is to do something like, let's say, law school, and there's a likelihood that could change. When you think about your undergrad, when you think about your credentialing, do it in a way that you maximize your optionality and pivot as you need to stay satisfied personally, but to keep that career optionality. A couple of final points. I highly recommend seeking out mentors and sponsors as you're going through your journey. I mentor continuously. The world has figured out the notion of give back to the next generation. As I said earlier in the presentation, they will help you on your journey, and they will make you stronger and hopefully help you make less mistakes. And then last but not least on earning, I have, as an investor in tech, the global talent race is on. I have seen more opportunities in countries in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, where tech platforms exist to bridge talent from companies in one side to talent on the other side, all in this global race for the best. And you can be part of that race, with building your credentials and accessing those kinds of things. I've never seen more global opportunities in my entire career. Next thing I want to talk about is the spending. Okay, and spending is really interesting because spending is the thing that you have the most control over. And we like to use a term of move the goalpost carefully. And what we mean by that is that there's a tendency that as one makes more and more income, back to my first point, there's a tendency to increase one's spending pattern, one's burn rate, as they call it, to size to the income that they're earning. What we encourage people to do is we encourage them to do that very carefully. The slower you increase your the spend which you have control over, the more you will build savings, and the more you will be investing and compounding and so on. Okay, and how I talk about spending is as follows. Number one, you control it. This is, so you can decide, do I buy that pair of shoes or do I not? You have complete and utter control of that decision making. I never preach a deprivation narrative. I don't say don't have that coffee. I don't say, don't take care of yourself. But I think there are very smart ways using common sense on how to do this. And I actually use a story about myself that's a bit ridiculous, but I think it illustrates the point. And it kind of relates to my third point there of extending and substituting. My wife and I, for years, would buy Starbucks coffee twice a day, each of us. And I started to do the math on this, and it turned out that we were spending $20 a day, and we probably did that for 5 years. And if you do the math, that is $7,000 a year on coffee. It's nonsensical. And I had a moment of clarity where I'm like, I got to take control of this. I bought my own coffee setup, and I cut the spend down to $300 or $400 a year from 7,000. When you look at savings and compounding, you'll say that makes a heck of a lot more sense. I use it as a bit of an extreme example, but the point is there are ways to be smart about your spend without being deprivation driven. Okay. I will also say, as a 50-year-old, take it for what it is. But my view is that having another pair of shoes is not how you win the race. Status is not driven by that. You want experiences, you want connections, you want to build relationships and so on. That is the win in life. And so I think Paula's going to talk a little more about budgeting and related. And again, we encourage everyone to use a basic spreadsheet to build a budget, personal budget, and so on. Okay, now you figured out income, you have your spending, and you take the two, you minus them, and you come up with something that we call your net savings, positive or negative. Okay, if it's negative, that means you're going to have to incur some kind of a borrowing to cover it. That takes us to the debt conversation. Okay, and what I like to say about debt is you do not ever want to find yourself in debt for lifestyle choices. Okay, you want to keep a positive. That's back to the goalpost, keeping your spend sized appropriately. There are instances where it can make sense to incur debt. We identify two of them. Okay, first one is for your education. Okay, second one is for your house. And some countries are more homeowner centric, some are not. But where you are, if you're in Canada, if you're in Australia, if you're in the United States, you know, the act of borrowing to buy a home is a very common thing. Now, what we always say in all examples, education or housing, is that you have to understand that you have to pay that debt back. You have to understand that interest rates can go up. You have to understand that if you're borrowing to go to school at an Ivy League school and you come out of that with $200,000 or $300,000 in debt, and your earning potential is such that from that program you've taken is quite low, that math may not work for you. So be very smart about your choices around education, around the incurrence of debt with what your earning capacity are, and be honest with yourself. Okay, savings. So we've now kind of come through income, spend, the incurrence of debt in smart cases, and we have a net positive savings. Okay, very simple. Set up a low fee brokerage. The tools and tech are out there now to set up an investment account. Very easy globally. Start with small amounts. You can be very small now. Fees are very low. And then you'll start this investing process that will become addictive. I guarantee it. You start to see wealth build. You start to invest. You start to see compounding. It becomes addictive. Set up a disciplined process to do that on a monthly, yearly, however you do it basis. Okay, now I want to move to investing. So now you have your savings, and now we're going to talk about how you invest to start your compounding process. And the first comment that I always make when I talk about investing, and I have a finance degree that I got in 1994, and it was taught with all math. And quite frankly, I came out into the world and I start building my own wealth and start investing. And I realized at some point that investing is not math. Investing is behavior. Investing is what do you do and how do you be disciplined and how smart are you when things go wrong to continue along an investing program. And, I show this, I made every mistake possible and I was theoretically educated in the discipline. Okay, my goal here is to impart some of that to you. So hopefully you'll make a little, I did like following stock tips. Friend would call, hey, you should buy this. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. And it was undisciplined and I didn't have good frameworks. So the thing that really helped orient me is a book that came out off a blog post, which I have in the bibliography, called The Psychology of Money. It was a game changer for me. It taught me about the behavioral mistakes that one makes in the investing and money world. And I highly encourage you to read either the book, you can get it on Amazon, or a blog post, which is linked in the biblio that led to the book. Okay. And what I'm not going to read this slide, but what it said is that we make a mistake in investing. We think of it as math when in fact it's behavior. If you've built up a net worth of $100,000 and the market drops by 50% in a couple of weeks, which has happened multiple times in history, what do you do the next day to ensure that you start bouncing back from that? That is the win on the investing world. Okay, now, want to make a point to all of you. You're young. I know that already by virtue of the attendees, and that is special when it comes to investing. Okay, people sometimes ask me, would you like to be younger or blah, blah, blah. And I say, no, I've really enjoyed the life that I've had, but the one thing I don't have is the ability to get saving earlier and start the compounding process because I obviously I'm older than you. So the power of compounding, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is driven by time horizons, which you have plenty of. Start now. Okay, now we all know Albert Einstein, one of the most famous physicists in the world. He made a comment: compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And we're going to give an example to illustrate this. Okay, and this is the power of investing. Okay, if I said to you, Would you rather have $1 million or a penny that doubles each day kind of on top of itself for 30 days? Most people would say, I want the $1 million, of course, right? 30 days, a penny, what? But if you look at the math day by day on this chart that I've posted, you will see that the penny doubling daily is actually worth at the end of 30 days over $5 million. We use this to illustrate the power of compounding, which is money earning on top of money. We'll get to a more sensible example next. Okay, this is a true story. I have a neighbor who has a son who's 15 years old. His name is Luke. Okay, Luke has started to work in the neighborhood doing some landscaping and earning some money. He came to me and he said, what do you think I should do with my money? And I sat down and I put a spreadsheet together with him and I ran some math. And I said, Luke, if you save $1,000 a year, you invest that smartly and wisely, you don't interrupt it, you don't stop it, and you do that every year till the age of 65. We'll use that as a notional retirement age. You earn 7% a year. You can see from this slide that Luke will have $466,000. He will have outlaid over the 51 years, 51,000, but the money earning on top of money shows the power of compounding. And you can see the more time that you have in those outer years of compounding, the more it benefits you. And I will illustrate that on the next slide. Luke has a brother, Eric, who's starting to work for Luke. Eric is 3 years younger than Luke, okay? And I did a similar exercise for Eric. And what he learned is that by starting 3 years earlier, 3 years, so 12 versus 15, you can see on here that the value of his account when he is 65, so the same age as Luke would be, is $575,000, which is, if I flip back, it's $100,000 higher for 3 more years at $1,000 with compounding. That is the power. Our brains do not do well with exponential style math. And so we need to illustrate these concepts. And the point is get in early, be disciplined, and don't interrupt. Okay, just to conclude on investing. So we talked about setting up an investment account using digital technology and tools. We talked about transferring that a small amount of your savings each month. All right, simple investment. We're not going to get into detail on that. Lots of research can be done. Do not touch or interrupt for any reason. Back to the compounding point, repeat and increase. You will be very happy as you get older. The last point that I want to make before moving to the final section is the math I showed is, I used $1,000 as a representative example. If you're in a country with different purchasing power parity and your system, it makes more sense where it's $100 a year or even $10 a year, the math is completely divisible. So if you put $100 a year in, you will, you'll do the divisible math and you will end up properly compounded in the right place for your country and your purchasing power parity. It doesn't matter where you are. Okay, a corollary point, last point on investing is in countries where home ownership is a common thing, it is actually, studies have shown that wealth increases by virtue of having bought a home, typically through leveraging putting debt on the home and leveraging it. And also it adds discipline the act of being a homeowner adds discipline. Okay, my net worth has dropped greater than 25% 3 times. .com 1 crash, credit crisis crash, pandemic crash. What did I do each of those times? Absolutely nothing. I did not interrupt the savings. I did not sell anything. I just let it boom and it always comes back. That is the nature of the system that we are in. I want to make a point that there's all these financial pundits that you see on TV and on the news and so on. Disregard them all. They are not there to teach. They are not there to educate. They are there to entertain, and they create the wrong behaviors. I was asked about crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin and all these other stocks that are flying all over the place. What I say to people, again, I'm not a deprivation narrative, but in your framework, use very, very small amounts of capital if you want to speculate. Your real wealth building is done through savings and discipline. However, you may want to have some fun, take some replacement, but do not consider that as real long-term investing. Your blood pressure should never increase when you're investing. Okay, last but not least, what is the definition of rich? I want to conclude here because it is not how many Lamborghinis or Ferraris you have in your driveway. In my opinion, the definition of rich is freedom. And what does freedom mean? Freedom means the ability to have complete and utter control of your time. What does control of your time mean? It means that you have income, investment income ideally, that covers your spend, which you control and allows you to live however you want to live. Okay, last but not least. So a few next steps here. You have unfettered ability to build a curriculum to get more educated on this topic. We'll show you the biblio in a second. I've talked about networking and seeking out mentors. Start your budgeting process, start thinking about some of these concepts, get your account open and start investing as early as possible. There's a lot we didn't talk about. You'll start your discovery process and your learning. And from a biblio standpoint, and I know that the slides will be sent out, I've broken it up into the mindset side, which I started talking about early, financial behavior, so how you kind of get through some of those dark days when things go the wrong way. And by the way, much of this is free, podcasts and blogs and so on. And then I have another section. All of this is free on this section. There's a course you can take if you want to go deeper online. There's blogs, there's a whole bunch of books that are free, and I highly encourage you to explore them. So I want to thank you all for your time. I'm going to hand it back, turn off my video, and I'll be sticking around to answer any questions that you might have. Thanks again.
With that, I will introduce you to Paula.
Thank you, Brice, and thank you, Convergence Tech and the Global Student Alliance. This is amazing. My name is Paula Vanni. I work for CIBC in British Columbia, Canada. I manage the people that work at the branches, the banking centers, and help our clients achieve their ambitions. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I think financial literacy is something, fortunately or unfortunately, we spend most of our lives trying to master. So there's some tips in here I hope you can take away from it. So my agenda real quick, I'm going to talk about protecting yourself from fraud, budgeting as a post-secondary student, some concepts that can go all the way through, which is nice, managing your money through saving and investing, managing your credit wisely, and then you're going to have your panel and you can submit questions also for me, happy to answer. So let's talk about protecting yourself from fraud. So hopefully very few of you or none of you have been a victim of fraud. But just so we're clear, fraud occurs when someone gains something of value, usually money or property, from a victim by knowingly misrepresenting facts or information. The potential costs are many. In addition to making your life upside down, you can be out real money, real assets. It jeopardizes your privacy, your peace of mind. It's time consuming, even if you are protected, and it can impact your credit score. So protecting yourself is really the best way to do this. So I have some examples that you may or may not be aware of. Hopefully you're aware of it and you've avoided it. But the first one, an offer to pay to use your debit card or credit card. And what happens there is someone will say, oh, you make this deposit for me? It's $1,000. I'll give you $200 of it back. It's just my card's not working, what have you. There's nothing behind that check, so it'll come back as fraudulent and you'll be out the money. The next one is kind of going through your personal information online, your digital footprint, and sneaking out some of the information to impersonate you in another digital channel. So again, the way to avoid that, like, let's be careful about what you post on social media, contests, quizzes, things like that can seem benign, actually are information gathering. And then there's overpayment through Kijiji or Craigslist or what Facebook Marketplace, all the digital online platforms. And someone will say, oh, the books are 30, but I have this check. I'll give you this check. You just give me the difference. And then you're out the books and the difference. So the basic rule, and we see it all the time in the bank, sadly, is if it sounds too good to be true, it is. If there's something that makes the back of your neck tingle or you go, well, this seems wrong, it is wrong. And so try to avoid it. There we go. The next one is email and text fraud, and there's also phone fraud. And so this is where fraudsters pose a legitimate business or government agency. In some cases in Canada, we've got a CRA scam that comes via the phone where they say it's the CRA, we're coming to get you. Give us all your information. And what they do is they come at you with information that seems very similar to legitimate, but it's not. And they get extra information, your password, your bank card, your credit card, and what have you. So the way to avoid this is to pay attention to the email address, look at the way you're addressed, and then the email links to click, because that kind of stuff doesn't happen in a legitimate business relationship. Every company is very cautious about your privacy. So be cautious when you're asked for personal information. Don't open an attachment or a link from an unsolicited email or text message, and watch for formatting and spelling errors. Debit and credit card fraud is the same, and it happens a lot. Sometimes a hidden camera or a PIN pad on the bank machine will obtain, or at the grocery store if you don't have a tap or whatever, and they will take a card reading device to obtain the data and then duplicate your card and use it all over. And we've seen countless numbers in Canada where situations where it's been very broad-based and a store gets all their stuff taken. So the way to protect yourself: shield your PIN, check your statements, check your transactions, report anything that's unauthorized. Don't give out your information unless it's to a reputable merchant. Report the card lost immediately if you lose it. Lock your card, there's a function, and set for alerts. Most card companies will have some sort of alert where you can get a text message and ask for a one-time verification code if things are out of the ordinary. So the final one I think I've got here is identity theft and fraud. And this happens an awful lot also. And so someone will have somehow pretend to be you, access your bank account, open a new account, transfer money, take the funds. By the time you figured it out, it's all gone or it's been moved around or whatever. And how to protect yourself: shield your PIN again, keep your information private, check your statements. Don't give out your credit card information unless it's to a reputable merchant. Use the lock your card, set the alerts, and then also expect to have to give a one-time verification code. If you lose your card and you have to go to the bank, expect to be asked lots of questions. Welcome it, because that's how we protect you, by verifying your identity and using a one-time verification code. So all of that to say, now let's talk about the next hot topic. I thought it was funny that Holly called them hot topics. They're not that hot, but they are really important, is budgeting. And this one's a tough one. And a budget is a plan, as Brice mentioned, that gives you a clear picture of how much money you have coming in, income or savings, and where you're spending it. And so by looking at this, it does help you manage it. You can't look at something unless you really understand where it is that your money's going. Many people think budgets are no fun, but they can help you get something you really want. And that's the way to look at it. By not spending today, you can spend later or save for later even. So if you're under budget, so at the end of the day, you've got extra money left over, as Brice said, you can put it into a rainy day fund, emergency fund, pay off outstanding debt, put it into savings. And if you're overspending, you can look at ways, by looking at your budget, where the money was spent, to cut back, scale back, and come out a little bit ahead. Now, one of the rules that we like to talk about is the 50-20-30 rule. And what you can see here is, even though it's tough to stick to, and especially as a student, we have finite resources. By having a sort of a rule, it allows you to make less decisions, so you don't get tired of making decisions. You just allocate it and then adjust it. So 50% to essentials. So if you had a certain amount of money for the year, 50% goes to the basics: transportation, home, housing, food, utilities. 30% goes to all the good things: the coffees, the shoes, the gadgets, the entertainment, gym. And then 20% goes to, if you can, large purchases later. If you know you have to buy a car, you know you got to pay, something's coming up, you've got to move, and you got to put it down, deposit on your next apartment. Retirement, if you're further along or lucky enough to have extra. Investing, vacation, even birthday presents and things. So how to create a basic budget. Now, there's lots of free software. There's lots of, your bank will have software if you love a spreadsheet. I have a husband who's an engineer and he lives for a spreadsheet. He's created his own spreadsheets. It can be something that you can actually get some enjoyment out of. You can use this to track all your expenses into the categories, and then create charts and see where you can make shifts that'll make a really big difference in your life. So if you budget, for example, the key is to come up with extra money at the end. So in this case, the total expenses at the bottom, plan versus actual, there's a $10 difference. That $10 then can go into a savings, defer it to the next month, whatever. So there's a way to set money aside if you use a budget, and it can go both ways. It can build you a buffer. So building a budget aside, how do you stay on budget? And there's some great tips here to make good choices when working through your budget. Before purchasing, make sure it's something you really want to spend money on. Watch for traps, things like Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes. They sure sound good. And then $25 later for something that you probably didn't need, it can eat away at your budget. Make a list, shop around, wait for sales. Instead of spending that $10 that's left over, squirrel it away, save it for later. Earn more, part-time work, babysitting, whatever you can do. I say babysitting, but I babysat my whole undergrad degree just because, hey, university kids are good babysitters. They're nice and mature. And I made a ton of money that helped me get through things, plan for occasional expenses, and then revisit your budget over time. Now I'm going to talk about saving and investing, and I'm going to go kind of quick here because Brice did a lot of great work on the investing part. So I'm going to focus more on savings. So it's important to know what you're saving for. So you've got to set some specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. You can't say, I want to save $4,000 to next year's tuition. Or no, you can say, instead of saying, I want to save money for tuition, say I want to save $4,000. What that does is it helps you classify it, prioritize, narrow it down, and actually achieve it because you can make a plan. So the benefits of that are you can pay yourself first towards your goal, and then it won't feel punitive. It'll feel like a good news story that you did this. So how do you pay yourself first? And that's one of those old school things that sounds easier than it is. What you do is set up an automatic transfer of some kind so that you develop a savings habit. As Brice said, it does feel good to save. It removes the temptation to spend. It helps you set aside money for future, and it also gives you a buffer. I thought of something earlier when we did the presentation that I didn't share, but when I have two kids, and when we had two kids, if you haven't gone through or you're going through, when you have your kids, it's a bit of a financial holy cow. And so we said we didn't have any money. We were young and working and all that stuff. And we set aside $10 a week. We decided with each kid, we would set it up like an allowance, $10 a week just to do a savings account, not even to an investment. And we said that money would be there for later, whenever the kids needed, if they needed to buy a car when they graduated high school or to go to university, or they wanted to go on a trip, or we needed to supplement. And we put it in a savings account because we didn't want to risk it because we were not super flush. But now looking back, $10 a week times 17 years times 52 weeks, it's a lot of money. And the advice I'll tell you is you'll never regret savings. Even if you can't invest it and it's just a slush fund or an emergency fund, you'll never regret it. So find a way to pay yourself first, even if it's $10 a month. So now I'm going to talk about compounding a little bit, just another example for you in terms of Brice's. And if you look at Marie, Jonathan, and Sarah, they each invested $100 a month, 5% annual return. And you can see the difference between Marie, and she's got 110,000, Jonathan's got 81, and Sarah's got 58. So that's the compounding of interest on interest. So basically that just says, regardless of what you can save, the sooner you start, the more you'll have at the end, because interest on interest is magic. So now I'm going to talk about credit essentials. When I say credit, I mean borrowing. So credit is an agreement where a borrower receives access to funds from a lender and agrees to pay back at a later date with interest. Could be a student loan, could be a credit card, could be a number of different things. So credit score is a number in Canada. It's between 300 and 900, and it helps determine your ability to repay your loan. And it's based on all your credit habits and history. So the outstanding debt, that's the money that you owe, how you make those payments, if you make them on time, when you open the accounts, how much you owe if you had missed payments. And in Canada, it's two parties, Equifax and TransUnion, and the higher the score, the easier it is to get credit, and sometimes at a lower rate. So your credit score is very important to protect. In terms of forms of credit, we've got credit cards, spoke about that, and hopefully maybe everyone's got a credit card. It's certainly helpful in the digital world, but it allows you to make purchases and pay later. Perfect for emergencies, travel, online spending. A lot of people use their credit card as a budgeting tool because it tracks everything automatically and then they pay it off at the end of the month. But it does charge you interest when you don't pay it off. And the interest is very high relative to the other forms of loans and lines of credit. Now, a loan is a fixed amount with a fixed payment, and at the end of that fixed amount, it'll pay it off. Usually you can pay it off at any time without fees or charges, and it's fixed or variable rates. Things like a car loan, a student loan, RSP loans, something else we do. Lines of credit offer flexible payments. It's got a credit limit like a credit card. They're usually a little different in that they can be sometimes secured by your home, sometimes they're secured by the fact that you're a student, or it's just an unsecured line of credit. It is a variable rate and revolving. Again, it's a variable amount, but its rate is significantly lower than a credit card. So tips for building good credit. There's a few things that you gotta keep in mind with your good credit, because you never know when you're gonna need it. And when you need it, sometimes you can't get it if you've had trouble in the past. So spend what you can pay back, pay on time. Your phone bill, your cell bill, all of those things report into the credit agencies. Pay off your balances in full each month. Don't exceed your limit, obviously. Avoid cash advances unless you really need the money, because they're very expensive. And as soon as you take the money, interest starts being charged by most cards, and you also pay a fee. Check your statements regularly, make sure everything is on there, and use it as a tool rather than a bit of a crutch. So now I'm going to recap. So I went through a lot, so it's called a crash course for a reason. But some of these topics might seem basic, but there's still things that in my financial literacy, I still struggle with sometimes, because those next pair of shoes sure look good. And in a pandemic, everything is different. So your financial well-being depends on have some kind of plan, some steps towards a balance between spending now, spending later, saving, building good habits. You need to be aware, you need to watch your security as you move through the digital and online world, and get advice. It could be your parents, could be your bank, could be someone you trust, but ask for help, could be someone at the school. Small steps are steps in the right direction. And think about that $10 a week times $7, 17 years times 52 weeks, it's like $8,000. And I can get by with $10 less a week. I just figure it out. So if you can find a way to save, let's do it. So I went kind of quick there because I wanted to allow time for our wonderful panelists. I want to thank you for letting me come. I want to thank Convergence Tech for inviting me. We do have a student hub, and I think this will all be sent out to you. So Holly, hope I didn't talk too fast, and I'm going to pass it back to you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much. Such valuable information. I'm going to introduce you to our fabulous student panel. So my first student, guest student, is Minan. And I am told that he has a 3-step approach to financial wellness. And this includes people or tools or anybody that has helped him along the way that he can pass along to you for some of that advice. So with that, I'll let Minan share with us his tips.
Sure. So hello, everyone. So I'll start off with, I guess I do have a couple steps towards kind of achieving financial wellness that I've kind of implemented in my own life. So just start off with a big, I guess, background on that. So back when the pandemic started, I guess a year and a half ago or so now, that's kind of where I realized that I wanted to take financial literacy a little bit seriously, because I saw a lot of people losing their jobs and different things were happening. And a lot of people were kind of just in a tough spot because they only had one source of income and things like that. And really, when you're on one source of income and something happens, you lose your job, you're kind of in a pickle. You don't really know what to do. You can't pay your bills. So I kind of started to take financial literacy seriously. So to start off with, I guess the first tip. So like Paula mentioned for the CIBC segment, I used a similar saving structure, which was like a 50, 20, 30 saving structure. So I also live at home with my parents. So it's kind of not really paying the rent. So I can shift around the numbers, but I did a little bit of like a 50-50 segment. So what happened was when I was working, I would do 50% of the money I earned going straight towards saving, and then later on investing when I started learning about that. But I think the first step is that when your money comes in, when you're saving, or I guess when you are working, is that you shouldn't treat all the money that comes in as kind of like spendable money. You should kind of do like a 50-50 split with that. So 50% of the money could be used towards things that you want to, I guess, spend. You want to go out with your friends. Another good 50% you can save, because like Paula and Brice said, you're never going to regret saving, because you're always going to be able to use that later on, whether it is for something you'd like, but you could also use it for a bigger purchase. So that was one thing. The second thing I would say is get a credit card for sure. My parents kind of also, they used their debit cards and didn't really use credit cards too much. So I didn't know too much about that, but building your credit's like a huge thing that you should do. because like moving on in the future, when you want to get a loan for either a home or for a car or anything, you want to have a really good credit score, because then that will lower your interest rates. You're not paying a lot in fees, other things like that. So the biggest thing I'd say is get a credit card, but obviously use that wisely, because that money is not kind of money you have. Like, so they may give you a $2,000 credit card limit, but don't treat that as I have $2,000 every month, because you should pay it in full and things like that. I guess the biggest thing would be, I guess it's more like 2-3 step plan, is that you should always save, like Paula and Brice said, either whether it's 50-50, trying doing a 50-20-30 split, whatever you can do. And then I guess the second one would be to continuously build your credit, because like I said, using your debit card or using money that you already have is great, but kind of using the credit card perks and building your credit will always help you in the future. So I guess that's kind of the main 2 tips I had. Holly.
Yes, thank you. Excellent, Manyam. Thank you for sharing with us.
Wow.
And it's always helpful to hear from your peers, I think.
Sure.
And with that, I will introduce another peer, Anthony. And Anthony is going to chat with us a little bit about how he differentiates between needs or wants, or otherwise known as maybe good versus bad purchases.
How's it going, everyone? Great to be here. So I find a little bit about myself to start off. So my name is Anthony, and I'm currently a student of studying business at the York University. And my kind of journey with financial literacy began when I started working. And I find that working really teaches you a lot about the value of money, and it's not something just to be thrown away. And that's where this leads to the difference between needs and wants and good and bad purchases. So whenever I look at a purchase, I break it down into a few things. So in regards to needs and wants, I always consider, why does it cost as much as it does? And the reason why I present that question is because we live in a society that's very brand driven, and we, especially as youth, we purchase many things that are based on others' opinions, and we want to please others. So whether it be something as simple as a t-shirt, as similar to how Brice talked about not depriving yourself of basic necessities, such as the coffee, you can purchase a t-shirt, but with the brand, it would cost additional money, and that creates difficulties on yourself as someone who may be working a part-time job, going to school, things as such. So why does it cost as much as it does? And you need to also consider, am I buying this for myself, for my own needs, or to please others? A couple other questions I like to ask is, how will I benefit from this purchase? How often will I use this item? And will this purchase depreciate or appreciate? And have I done the appropriate research? And am I being objective with my decision? Which also ties into good and bad purchases. So whether it be investing or you're buying and reselling something, are you looking at it through a lens that is in the best interest financially rather than emotionally? It's important to separate that difference between the psychological and emotional levels. So you may want it, and because it makes you feel good. And I'm not saying don't spend, because we all have our wants, and it's important to spend a little bit of money and to get what we need. But if you sleep on that decision and you still decide that it's something you need or want, then most likely it's something that you should pursue and go about. But these few pillars and these few questions that you ask yourself are more so designed to reduce impulse buying and decisions and purchases that you may regret in the future, because some things when you buy, that's yours for good, right? Unless you can return it and whatnot. And as the theme of this event today has continued to be, you'll never regret saving, because it's something that down the road, it enables you to have the option and freedom to do as you wish, whether it's a future purchase, as Paula mentioned, deferring your purchases, or as Brice talked about, really just having that financial freedom and the ability to do as what you want in the future and not be held back and tied to your financial position.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That's great. I think that a lot of us have probably evaluated our spending habits over the last year or two. So I think that's really valuable advice for everyone. I'm going to start off by asking Victoria a question. And this is, what tips do you have when it comes to managing your taxes at this age?
Yeah, so I'm Victoria. I'm a high school student, so quite obviously I do not pay taxes currently. But what I do to try and keep up with taxes is that I try to stay knowledgeable with the information out there on the internet, just to pick up a few tips just in preparation for when I do have to pay taxes. So for example, I am in Canada currently, so one thing we have is a tax-free savings account, which is an account that allows you to gain capital without having to pay the extra taxes. I know in the US, it would be the Roth IRA. And so, depending on where you're from, there's probably options out there in regards to tax accounts. In addition, just knowing how to be smart with your money, because so with your income, for a lot of countries, they do take a considerable or significant portion with your taxes. So here in like Canada, it's around like 30%. So if you have like an income of 100K, you might end up getting around 70K to spend and utilize. And so knowing that, you can possibly find other ways on managing your money. So if you do have a higher income, possibly use offshore accounts to avoid taxes. Obviously, do not evade taxes, but avoiding taxes and other tips and loopholes within our system would be quite beneficial. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Jamie, yes, welcome. Is your approach to financial freedom typical amongst your peers? And is this something that you talk about together?
Well, I guess I stick to a budget personally, but unfortunately, like what Brice mentioned before, it is that financial literacy isn't mandatory in many educational curriculums right now. And I tend to keep up with my financial literacy through external sources, using Investopedia, for example, or crash course videos that do keep me in check in terms of what I have to do to better guide my future financial life. Um, it's also very important to integrate that financial literacy programs and courses into school curriculum to let the students have a better understanding for financial paths and the importance of money in the latter days. But yeah, I do talk a lot about how you can better improve your your spending of money, and also how you can better save and approach certain financial challenges that may impose upon you.
I'm curious for both of you. I know, what are some of the topics that you do talk about with each other when it comes to finances? Is there something that is just a topic that continuously comes up, for example? I'm sure our audience might be able to relate to that.
Most likely saving and budgeting, because we are approaching the age where most of us head into post-secondary school, and we know the tuition for that can be quite extravagant. And so just knowing how to budget and save your money is quite important. Even like right now, my friends and I currently share a Disney Plus account just to cut down on the prices of using that service. And for the future, whether it's like finding scholarships to save tuition money or working a part-time job, all those are just ways that we try and keep ourselves updated.
That's helpful. I like that sharing technique. I know amongst, young mothers, that's something that they try to discuss with each other as well. You know, what kind of services that we can go in on together to create savings. And Paula, I don't know if you have some advice for that type of question that students in particular are trying to save and prepare as they move from secondary to post-secondary education. Is there something from your perspective or your industry that can help?
We have a whole student hub that we're happy. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, my computer's giving me trouble today. We do have a student hub that talks about things, and I have a son who's 17. And so during the whole pandemic, saving while going to school and living your best life and dealing with the multiple things that come up is always a topic. And it's the whole pay yourself first, even if it's $5, or set a limit. So with my son, I shared this morning on the session, he was working at an ice cream shop for the last year, and he's managed to save $4,000 because we made him put away half of it. And we said, trust us, you won't regret it. You can use it later. And now here we are in the winter, and his shifts are gone down. And he's like, oh, well, it's a good thing I had that little bit of money. So, you know, I've done presentations at schools where I did one at a naturopath school, and the students are riddled with debt. And they have to be sometimes to get through. But even then, you want to save a little, because you might need a car when you go to start practice. You might need to pay for some instruments when you go to start practice. Like, so that it's tricky, but the best thing to do is to talk to someone and then just start it. Just start.
Yeah, I'm curious, you know, it's not always a topic that I hear, you know, teens or younger students discussing financial wellness or freedom. So either Victoria or Jamie, is there something that inspired you to have this, you know, awareness? Was there an event, or was it just a personal passion, or is it something that your family's already involved in?
It's actually a plethora of people that have inspired me to take a lot of, I guess, financially responsible pathways. My parents, my mother, my father, my finance teacher, and kind of also my own research that allowed me to understand the importance of money and especially budgeting, and that the forthcoming trials that I would face would inevitably be a part of my life, and I would have to, it's important that I would have to kind of crucially take that into consideration, prepare for those future challenges, and any, I guess, causing some worrisome for my mental well-being. But I guess that's just part of life, and I do try to budget a lot of my income I earn in terms of bi-weekly and monthly, just to kind of prepare for that challenge, I guess.
That's great, thank you. And I'm curious, anybody here, Paula or Victoria, what's the best financial advice anyone has given to you? I know, and this could just be like, you know, something your mom told you growing up, or something that you heard from a show, for example.
Victoria, I don't know if you've got any yet.
I would say that you actually brought it up during your presentation, Paula. It was the pay yourself first. So I like picked that up while reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, as you know, one would. And I really found that quite insightful, because usually people would first pay their bills and pay their necessities before they start saving and then investing into things like stocks and real estate. But really, if you like turn that perspective around and think, instead of like coming home with $1,000 after paying off all the necessities and spending that money into, I guess, real estate or stocks, you would actually end up earning more than if you were to pay other things first.
Yeah, I would agree, Victoria. And delayed gratification is tricky. Like people talk about their love language and all that. My love language is shopping. I have an issue. And in pandemic, it's given me so much joy. But I have to always realize that what I do today, I can't do tomorrow. So am I sure that I want to buy this today? Because it means tomorrow, when somebody else sends me an email and tells me it's on sale, I can't buy it. And my dad was a banker, and he used to come, it's a terrible story, but this is what happens when we have really square parents. He was a banker. And every year at tax time, he would do my taxes, and he would say, how would you like $63.27? And I would say, sure, Dad, give me 63. He said, that's how much you spent on ATM fees at other banks' ATMs. And I'd be like, Dad. But so it took a couple years to get through, but then eventually I was like, point taken, noted. That's a stupid way to spend my money. I should save it and use it somewhere else. So there's lots of good advice. It's just hard to apply it.
And maybe sometimes the source matters, right? So of who we listen to, the little voices that you hear on a regular basis. Well, thank you so much. I think we had a really valuable conversation today. Again, if there's any questions from our audience, please feel free to share those with us. Is there any, I'll just kind of do a roundtable. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with today? Just a little piece of advice, having shared your time and thoughts with us.
I guess for me, sticking to a budget is very important. In today's society, it does carry that negative connotation among my peer group, I guess. But I guess financially planning for your future and becoming financially independent provides you that greater flexibility and adaptability for your future as well. Like mentioned by Victoria and Paula and Brice, that you do have to, balance your mortgage payments in the future, or even your university tuition, food, clothing expenses, and other miscellaneous costs that you would have to tackle. And keeping these budgeting skills to get, to prepare yourself to be ready to tackle those problems is important to know. I guess it's the importance of growing that resilient mindset to budget and to make sure that you don't steer clear away from that path is important. Something that I also keep to myself is to avoid impulse purchases. I tend to keep at least something that I know is not essential to maybe 5% to 7% of my monthly income, so I don't have to overspend, and also I guess not eating up into other expenses that I do have to take care of and that I am responsible for. I guess also kind of one book I would recommend would be Misbehaving by Professor Richard Thaler. I think he has a wonderful book in terms of describing the behavioral side of humans and how that affects the overall economy. That helped me a lot as well in terms of describing the opportunity costs that you have in life and how you can better balance yourself when you know how you can better control what you do in life. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents that I could leave here.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Victoria, I'll let you go.
Oh yeah. I guess if you want to dive further into like the financial world, is to read a lot of books. That's where I like to get a lot of my financial knowledge. Because as like Jamie mentioned before, like our curriculum doesn't really provide much in terms of like financial wellness. And so really taking that initiative to do your own research and figure out what's up with the financial world is really important, especially since, money does matter, especially when you do transition into an adult. And so just like keeping up with the knowledge that is out there in the world is quite crucial.
I love it.
I guess that leaves me. So I like that we're calling it financial wellness because I think it's important, because we think about wellness in terms of mental health and physical and all that kind of stuff, but your money is so important. And working in a bank, I see the highs, I see the lows, I see the way it can stress people out with unexpected things. It's a terrible impact when your money source is threatened, or you've made choices that get you in a rut, or the world's made choices that gets everybody in a rut. The other thing I would say is Bruce's time is on your side. Time is also on everyone's side all the time. It's never too late. So if you get yourself, if you get yourself in a rut, you can get out, but you got to sit down, make a plan, and take some action. So it doesn't matter if you're my age or student's age. Whatever happened in the past can't rewind, but you can move forward. So you can take that $10 a week, or you can take that whatever, and you'll feel better and you'll make steps, and over time it'll compound.
Yes, absolutely. Moving forward, just like Wayne Gretzky said, right?
Yep.
Follow where the puck is going. So we have just a few minutes left, and I want to thank everyone for being with us today, as well as our speakers. We have a few questions here, and if we don't get to all the questions live, we will follow up with you after the event. So still keep them coming. And Brice, I see a few of them are for you, so I'll let you pick and choose which ones you're able to discuss here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks very much, Holly. And thanks to all attendees for sticking through this. Hope this was educational. I'm going to answer all 3 questions, and feel free to ask 1 or 2 more if you'd like. So the first question I've got here is from Francisca Bergay. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you for your question. Francisca asks, since we are talking about money, what's your take on putting on NFTs? Okay, good question, Francisca. So NFTs are known to the world as non-fungible tokens. These are digital assets, typically on a blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger, that are unique and are not, well, I guess they're not fungible, which means they're not like Bitcoin or Ether, where every single Bitcoin or Ether are the same as another. Each of the non-fungible digital assets are unique. A very popular example right now is a group of art digital assets called the Bored Ape Yacht Club, of which 10,000 were made. Each one is a little bit different. You can buy them, you can trade them on the open market. I put NFTs in the category of a collectible. I do not prescribe true classic financial value in the sense of a economically income earning asset. And when I think about collectibles, I put them in the category that I talked about in my presentation of crypto and some of the other stock, kind of the meme stocks and so on. I personally don't invest in them, but for those that do, I recommend allocating no more than 5% of your portfolio to those types of things. If you asked me, what do I think of art as an asset class? I would say the same thing. I mean, we have our passions, we have our likes. Do not over allocate to these categories. But if you do want to participate, keep it small as a percentage of your overall portfolio. Okay. The second question is from Anonymous. Hello, Brice. If you're from a developing country and the economy is crashing, inflation rising, etc., how would you advise citizens from there to invest? This is an excellent question. I've had this before. We do have a global audience. So when we think about inflation, first of all, we haven't seen a lot of it in the developed world in a long time. I will make a broad comment that I do believe there is a high likelihood of a much higher inflationary environment across the world over the next number of years as we see issues with supply chain and so on and so forth that are occurring. And in fact, inflation, as we're tracking it, is actually increasing kind of as we're coming out of the pandemic. There's a lot of reasons for that. But if you are from a country that has kind of chronic inflation over time, over recent era, whatever, here are some thoughts. If you're going to invest in the country, typically you want to look at inflation sensitive assets. Okay, examples are real property, often real estate, other infrastructure and real assets that can change their prices and mirror the inflation environment, which then creates cash flow that can be paid out. Bonds that might be indexed to inflation. In the US, they call them TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. There may be some other examples of those. The other thing that one can think about is, given the ability to invest globally relatively easily now with digital tools and so on, if you're in a high inflation country, you've got your saving, okay? You can convert that saving to, let's take an example, to the US dollar, invest in a global digital account let's take US assets as an example. They can be inflation protected within the US, plus you're benefiting from the likely currency appreciation of the US dollar relative to your currency, which will typically depreciate in inflation. So there's a number of ways to skin it. I would encourage you to do more research on it, but yes, there are, call it favorable ways to invest on the inflation file. Okay, next is it a good idea to invest in agricultural assets, considering that they multiply in cases of buying flock? Okay, so the agricultural asset class is become a lot more popular in the world in recent era. People have realized that farmland is can be a very positive appreciating asset over time, as we need to feed an increasing world, as climate patterns are changing in terms of what becomes considered a productive asset, as yields are increasing on the growing of food, and so on and so forth. What I would say to you is, I don't want to say it's a good or a bad idea. It can be a fine idea to invest in agriculture. We have done so in our group. What I will say is, I always come back to, always keep it in the context of an asset allocation framework where you're never exposing yourself too much to a single asset class, and you decide within those asset classes what you want to select that will diversify your portfolio over time. And agricultural assets can be a fine example in that context. Next question is from Miracle. Thank you, Brice. I appreciate how you mentioned that you didn't panic during market crashes. I'm seeing a lot of fear in the market due to the Omicron variant. What advice do you have for staying calm during market downturns? This is an excellent question, Miracle. And quite frankly, it is kind of the primary thesis of my presentation. And what I've spent a lot of time in recent era thinking a lot about behavior, thinking a lot about resiliency, thinking a lot about anti-fragility, as I mentioned. And what I would say to you is there are behavioral patterns that one can create by actually learning and building the skills of entrepreneurial resiliency, or of investing resiliency. So what I would start with is read some of the bibliography around behavior and mindset that I put in. They will start to provide you with frameworks about how to think about pressure moments. So when you're in kind of the heat of the moment, when the market is collapsing, to use that example, and you have choices about how you react, to have a framework, to be able to take that breath, to be able to talk to a peer or a parent or an investment professional, to talk your way through the patterns that repeat themselves through cycles when things go up and things go down, and just to approach things with a calmer and safer kind of mindset, knowing that every pattern of history has repeated itself and that one never sells at the bottom of a crash. One keeps a level head. In fact, the argument would be if you have liquidity, you would buy in those instances, and just to kind of keep your head about you and so on. Those would be some of my thoughts. Now, I'll make one other comment. I've mentioned that I've been through 3 of these: .com, credit crisis, and the pandemic. Each time, my net worth has grown over the years, as you would expect, as yours will. The first time was relatively small. I took a drop. Candidly, I kind of panicked. Okay, I sold a bunch of stuff. I actually fired a financial advisor, and I kind of changed my program. I'll call that my mistake era, where I learned from the mistakes the next time. So after the first crash, I kind of recalibrated my system. I was young enough where I rebought, and then I rebuilt, and then the credit crisis happened, and it dropped 60%. Actually, it was very painful. And so what I did there is I had learned from that first one not to do rash and panicky moves. I had already got a framework in mind that said, if we have a market issue, I'm diversified enough. I've got my asset allocation strategy. I have a safety fund that doesn't require me to sell to get immediate liquidity, and so on. And I was able to kind of move through that one a lot cleaner. When the pandemic hit, another big drop, I had already, I'd gone through 2 now. I was even more, I would say, level-headed. My net worth had increased more. I had been studying resiliency. I'd been doing a whole bunch of other things that were helping the behavioral, and I was able to get through that even smoother. So again, I would encourage you to actually take on the act of studying the behavioral sides of these things in the bibliography I put out, thinking about some of the biases that humans have, cognitive biases and so on. And I think it can be very powerful to kind of help you through what will inevitably be these crises. I think that's all I see on questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I give a big round of applause for all of you for joining us today. And for those who have tuned in, we hope you gathered some really great insights about your own financial wellness. Those of us here at Convergence Tech are just delighted to bring you this summit today, and we're happy that you're a part of our network. And with that, I will say goodbye, good evening, have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are in this world, and thanks again for joining us.